Welcome to the Dairy News and Views podcast, a production of the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Dairy Team. Our podcast covers current educational, research, and industry tools available for your operation to manage healthy cows and calves while producing the highest quality dairy products. Thanks for joining us today on Dairy News and Views from the ISU Dairy Team. I'm Jen Bentley, Northeast Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, and I'm here today with my colleague Fred Hall, who's our Northwest Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, as we discuss today's topic. Welcome back to the podcast, Fred.
Well, thank you. It's always fun. And today, we've got dignitaries with us, challenge winners. So we're excited to have them.
That's right. I'm very excited about this podcast. Both Fred and I, both ISU alumni. So it's always great to get in contact with those students that are on campus right now and get a feel for what their experiences are versus maybe what ours were back, a couple years ago, Fred?
Yeah, a couple years ago. I like that.
Right. I'm happy today to introduce our students that are on our podcast. They are up and coming graduates from Iowa State University. And I'm going to welcome Becky Burns, Brianna McBride, Grace Jakes, and Anna Hansen to the podcast. So welcome all four of you to our podcast.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So let's start off by getting a little more than just the name. Tell us about yourself and what brought you to Iowa State. Becky, let's start with you.
All right. So I guess just to start, my name's Becky Burns. I'm originally from Burnville, Pennsylvania, which is in the southeastern part of the state, right above Lancaster County, which is, I guess, a pretty popular dairy area for maybe those who are more familiar with Lancaster. But I originally chose to go to Iowa State because I was interested in going to vet school. And so I was looking into schools with animal science programs and kind of dwindled it down to Penn State, my in-state school, and Iowa State. And ultimately, I decided to go to Iowa State after visiting, one, because the campus was beautiful, but also I was pretty shy when I was in high school. I think that a lot of my professors could probably tell you in my first year, I was very shy. And so I decided that I needed to go somewhere where I didn't know anybody and kind of push my comfort zone there. And so I ended up coming to Iowa State 16 hours from home, kind of forcing myself out of my bubble. So that's just a little bit about me, I guess.
Yeah, that shy thing, both Jen and I understand. We were pretty introverted. So Grace, tell us about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Fred. So yeah, I'm Grace Jakes and I come from Central Iowa. So I didn't come far to go to school, but it was definitely a little bit of a leap for me because I chose to come to Iowa State because I didn't have any agriculture background and I knew I wanted to work with large animals as a veterinarian. At least I thought I knew then. And so I also came from a homeschool background. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's go to Iowa State, jump into those 300 student class sizes and really challenge yourself. And I've never regretted it since. I definitely have had all the livestock experience that I've wanted and more so thinking to, the midnight shifts at the dairy farm where I was, I guess, milking or getting blood samples. Those are kind of, I think, the experiences for me.
Okay, next on the list, Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Hansen. I am originally from Decorah, Iowa. So Northeast Iowa, I basically say I'm basically from Minnesota because almost right on the border. I grew up on a little small 50 head dairy right next to a 900 head one. But my family actually sold our cows in 2014 and got out of the industry, but my passion still kept thriving through that. And I decided to come to Iowa State for animal science because of that. And also because my dad and my older two siblings went, and now my younger sister's here as well.
Okay, Brianna, you're the last duck on the pond. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Brianna McBride, and I'm from Severance, Colorado, which is just an hour north of Denver, right between Fort Collins and Greeley. So I'm about 10 hours from home here in Ames. And when I first came to Iowa State, I actually was looking more at the food science program, and I grew up with dairy cows, so I knew that side, but I didn't know what careers were out there. So my parents kind of encouraged me to look at some other opportunities too. So initially I came in as a food science major, but I knew that I loved dairy cattle and I was going to add that on regardless. So I came in as a food science major and initially added on a dairy science major. And now I'd say to this day, I almost lean more on the dairy science side than I do on the food science side. And I've loved every piece of it.
Okay, Grace had mentioned that she spent some time milking out at the dairy. The dairy that I milked at Iowa State was the old dairy where the Hansen Center is. How about you, Jen? Did you help with the chores out at the dairy while you were there?
I did. I was probably in the same parlor that you were at, Fred. So these students probably don't even remember that, but maybe there's pictures you've seen of that parlor.
It was the oldest dairy parlor west of the Mississippi. So that'll give you some perspective there.
Well, I appreciate you all introducing yourselves, and it's great to understand your backgrounds and what made you come to Iowa State and bring that passion of love of animals or of the dairy industry. And as you come into Iowa State, there's all kinds of opportunities, like you mentioned. You may have come in thinking you were going to be so focused on one area, but then all of a sudden all these other doors opened up with job opportunities or experiences that you just didn't know were out there. So I think that's great to expand on that. And as we talk about your experiences at Iowa State, could you each go around and just explain what maybe is your most memorable experience at Iowa State?
I guess I can start. I don't know if we're going in any particular order. I have to say that, COVID kind of threw a ring into things there right in the middle. In that end of sophomore, kind of beginning of junior year time. So there was a little bit of a lull in the middle, but I would say that senior year is kind of ended like the cherry on top with Dairy Challenge and being able to get more involved within the program. So I would say some of my most memorable experiences have been just driving across the state of Iowa to different farms with all of our pals just in tow in those 15 passenger vans. It's been a really cool experience to see what the state of Iowa has to offer with the diversity of farms. And I didn't grow up on a dairy farm or any farm for that matter. So it's kind of cool to get a lot of that on-farm experience and getting to see how different producers do things and how one thing for one farm works, but if you copy and paste it over to another farm, it doesn't work at all. So it's just been really fun to walk around those operations and just talked with the different students that we go with and just learn from them. It's also pretty cool to think that here in the next year, we're all going to be out in the industry or going on to grad school or vet school or those types of things, and knowing that we're all going to get to keep working together. So that's pretty exciting because I like working with them now. So I'm excited to work with them hopefully more in the future. What about you, Anna?
Definitely my most memorable experiences with Iowa State have been the people that I've met along the way. Becky knows this for sure. Becky and I have had a class every single semester since freshman year, met in Bio 211 lab, 7 a.m. Thursdays, I believe it was. I don't remember what day it was.
It might have been Tuesday. I don't remember.
But so it's definitely forming lifelong friendships with the people you meet and both in your major and outside of it, and then forming it over the years. Even this past semester, I formed a bunch of different friendships. For example, Brianna and I never really knew each other before this semester, and then we were on the dairy judging team, and then the Dairy Challenge team together, and just traveling all over the country with those has been amazing. And seeing all these different farms from industry that I grew up in and seeing how different it was, and hearing other people's experiences with the industry as well.
I have to echo some of that, especially with just the people that I've met. As Anna mentioned, we didn't really know each other until this year, and then we spent, I don't even know how many hours together with all of our trips. And, I look back at my college career, and I took a year off. I did an exchange at Cal Poly in California, and I love that experience so much, but I love it, I think, because when I came back to Iowa State, the people that I met and the experiences that I was able to have once coming back to Iowa State have just grown me as a person and have grown those connections that I've had with people. And it's also challenged me to ask more questions. And because of that, I think I've been able to embrace what's here at Iowa State and these farms that we've traveled to that I never would have thought to ask some questions and really get involved as much as I had without that experience, which has just led to more greater opportunities here at Iowa State to top off this senior year. So just some of those last experiences this past year have been some of the most memorable. And Grace, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brianna. I feel like there's a common theme here. I know for me, I would say the experiences that I've had, I never would have planned on having when I came to Iowa State is, the green behind the ears or whatever the expression is, freshman. I don't think that's the right expression, but I went to Uganda actually. And that was through, I have another major called Global Resource Systems but I was still able to focus on dairy even there. I know there was a farmer training that they discussed crossbreeding genetics and looking at, Jerseys and Holsteins and what's the best suited for kind of a heat stress type of climate environment. And that's stuff that applies here as well. And that's a huge, huge thing that I'm personally passionate about. But then also broadening my scope in terms of what I'm thinking about in agriculture, but then also the relationships that I've made. I know Becky's had to put up with me as a roommate now for 2 years. And it's gotten to the place, she has my location and she'll sometimes just check in and be like, yeah, she's either at the dairy farm or Kildee Hall. It doesn't matter the day or time. Anna knows that, sometimes I'll come in at 4 a.m. and she's seen my face when I'm not happy to be there. And I remember Brianna and I feeding together because Brianna's a feeder at the dairy right now. And I think I was just finishing when she was just starting. And so we know each other's struggles in that sense, for sure.
Well, you can definitely tell you've made some already lifelong friendships just by listening to the four of you. And I'm sure you have other friendships that you've developed. I would say for myself as a past ISU dairy alumni, the friendships and the networking was probably the best experience that I received as well, because now I look back, I'm going to date myself 20 years later, I still keep in contact with a lot of those dairy science alumni who are now either veterinarians, nutritionists, industry reps that I can call on them as either as a friend or as something work related that I may not have had a chance or an opportunity had I not gone to Iowa State. So Fred, how about you? What's your most memorable experience?
For me, it was the judging teams. I was one of those students that gets a rule named after him. I was on the dairy judging team and the livestock judging team, dairy products team. And at the end of the quarter, Fred Foreman, who was head of the department, said, yeah, we won't do that again. So I appreciate those of you who've been on these different extracurricular activities and appreciate how much effort goes into doing it well. You've all expressed some cool experiences. What advice do you have for someone who thinks they might be interested in dairy science and looking at Iowa State? What would you tell them?
I guess, should I start again?
Sure.
I'll start the order and then we'll pass it on. But that's a good question. I guess I kind of think about my experience I didn't have any agriculture experience. And so being an animal science major, I had no idea what my species of interest was. And I just so happened to kind of fall into the dairy science major, not really major, I guess I'm an animal science major, but the dairy science group of people, the industry. And I think what really drew me in was the community and just the people. And I think that we've kind of had a general theme here, is a lot of the people part of things. But I would just say for advice for someone who's thinking that they're interested or not really sure, I would just say start talking to people in the industry, start talking to friends or acquaintances that you have who grew up on farms or were associated with farms, because those are really the people who are going to teach you a lot about what the industry is all about and what you can expect from just the day-to-day life of someone working in the dairy industry. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of how I got pulled in, was just because I started talking to people. And the more and more I talked to people, the more and more I thought, wow, I think I could really like this. And I think this is something that would be really fitting for me. And it's a small industry too. I've learned that here a lot recently. If once you meet one person, you're going to meet 10 other people that know that one person. And over time, you'll have a big network of people who have different skill sets and experiences and even jobs. It's a great way to get jobs with talking to people. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question or is it good advice, but yeah, just start talking to people in the industry and eventually you'll get hooked in.
Grace, with your experience going to Uganda, you've interacted with a lot of folks. What would you tell someone maybe not even from this country who is looking at dairy science?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I've thought about this a lot, actually. And I think my answer, it's not necessarily specific to someone who is maybe not coming from the US, but I think it's valid for a lot of people from a lot of backgrounds. And it's focusing on this idea of imposter syndrome, wondering if you belong in an industry, because of that, I think that really impacts how people engage in an industry. Having been involved in dairy science and doing dairy science type activities for a time, I've seen that people just want people who are hungry, humble, and smart, motivated to succeed. It doesn't matter where you're from or what you're going to be doing, but that's something that people can say, but you have to believe it yourself. And so for me, it's, going back to what's my vision within the dairy industry, because wherever you are passionate about, there will be an opportunity in the dairy industry. I care about sustainability and food security. Does that apply to the dairy industry? Yes. Yes, it does. And so finding where that is and then coming alongside people who can be a good mentor. And that's something that may take a little bit of time, but you're going to find them because there are a lot of good people in the industry that care. And so, I just ask questions, and those people that are willing to answer and take time to invest in me, I continue to ask them more questions. And sometimes they're probably annoyed by how many questions I ask. Becky honestly, all three of them can attest to how many questions I ask in class. But I think that applies to everyone. Oh gosh. But I think that can apply to a lot of people, especially people who are like, I'm coming from outside of I'm coming with a cultural barrier or some other, perceived barrier to success.
My piece of advice would be just to get involved. College is about a bunch of different experiences. It's about finding what you don't, or what you like and what you don't like. And if you don't come into the industry with experience, this is a perfect time to get experience. For example, I currently work in our calf barn, and growing up, I was in charge of the calves. I would be feeding them, but it wasn't on this level. So I never had to tube feed a calf, never really gave vaccines and all this other stuff. But now I have that experience and I am comfortable enough to do so, and even teach and train new employees. Going along with the finding out what you do and don't like, sometimes it takes a little bit. For example, I didn't realize that I am a huge data nerd until beginning of last semester. So it takes time. It's a bunch of, what's the phrase?
Trial and error.
Trial and error. There we go. It's a bunch of trial and errors, and it's just getting that experience, but also having fun with it as well.
I'll end and say, my biggest advice would be, if you're going to come to college and you're considering dairy science, don't worry about if you aren't sure what job there's going to be, because there will be a job. Most of the jobs that I would consider now, I had no idea existed coming into freshman year. And I think there will still be so many jobs afterwards that I won't know that have existed even now. So if someone's looking at whether it's dairy science or something in that realm, maybe don't worry about that end goal, but just worry about what you're passionate about and follow your heart, and that you'll find a job. Don't worry about the money value at the end or something like that, because it'll pay off regardless, as long as you're following your heart and you have a love for it. It'll be worth it.
3 or 4 years at Iowa State, I'm sure there's been lots of new skills or skills that you've learned. Can you think of just one skill that you want to share with the group here that you find would be invaluable to maybe a future job or a future experience, or just something life related? Can you think of one thing that you would want to share?
For me, I would say two things. One is confidence, and being able to have confidence even when maybe I realize that something's challenging, or those types of things. And I think that's super valuable in any context. And the other is kind of in that nutrition space, thinking about how we feed cows in terms of the dollars associated with it, thinking in kind of that systems approach to going on a dairy and saying it's not just this one thing, but it's how a number of things interplay that impact how we see milk production, how we see cow comfort and health. And I think that systems thinking has been taught very well in our classes, and also through like the Dairy Challenge and Dairy Academy, as I was part of Academy. That was huge for us to incorporate into how we analyzed farms. So that's been something that I will definitely apply, not just to the dairy spectrum of things, but I've seen myself thinking about it in the context of swine systems, non-agriculture systems. It's really kind of broadened how I think about it.
I know one question that I always asked myself, even when I was deciding if I wanted to come to Iowa State, was what would I do if I wasn't afraid to do it? And that's kind of been they call it a mantra? Is that what that's called? It's just been kind of my life thing of, okay, what would I do if I wasn't afraid to do it? And I've definitely tried to embrace that through my years at Iowa State. And it's definitely yielded me learning a lot of those important skills that otherwise I wouldn't have gotten involved. I know Anna talked about that, and getting involved is so important. Looking at my resume now, it's so diverse with all the different opportunities I've been able to pursue at Iowa State. And each of those were good stepping stones to help me realize what I wanted to do. So ultimately now, I think that biggest skill that's going to be invaluable for my future is with what I've gotten from Dairy Challenge in learning how to talk to people, observe farms, think out of the box. And just that good consulting experience has been invaluable now that I'm looking to start that as my full-time job here soon. So I would say that's kind of my big thing, was one, kind of gaining that confidence, and that kind of yielded my biggest skill that I've gotten out of Iowa State just from trying so many different things. And yeah, I remember junior year, I had gotten to the point where I had tried so many different things and I couldn't narrow it down. I couldn't decide, okay, what do I want to do when I grow up? Because I had so many different things I had tried and I had really enjoyed, but it wasn't until I took one more step into doing Dairy Challenge, and Anna and I got involved at the Dairy Consulting Experience, which is hosted by Urus up in Madison, Wisconsin over winter break. And so I kind of taken a leap of faith into doing that. I had no idea if I would like consulting, but turns out I love it. So yeah, I would say that's probably my biggest skill that I took away, was just going for it and now embracing this new skill that I've gotten.
The one main skill, and I've been thinking here for a little bit, the one main skill that I have come out of Iowa State with is recognizing my own skills and as well as other people's, and making sure people are put to tasks that they're better able to use their skills in. For example, if working with Brianna and Becky on the Dairy Challenge team, and even Grace, I know I'm not as strong in nutrition, so I'll let Grace handle that. And then so for our Dairy Challenge team, we just delegated out who does what, but it's also that, okay, this isn't an issue, take a step back, have that humility, and then focus efforts on something else. So all in all, I guess what I'm trying to say is the skill to identify who's good at what to work better as a team.
And I'll end it here with, I'll try and keep it short and sweet, but to me, people come to college for education, and that's obviously a big part of why you go to college or any institution, but you learn a lot about life in college too. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that everything happens for a reason. And if you can't control it, you might as well laugh about it, because there's no good reason to be mad or upset and carry on this grudge for the rest of the day or for any amount of time. It's not going to do you any good or anyone else. So truly everything happens for a reason, whether it's the person you meet on the bus or it's a new job that you get. It all happens for a reason, and it all works out exactly how it's supposed to.
Fred, I think we need this group on our podcast every week. They bring such positivity. I want to hear this every week.
Absolutely. I guess the last question then, we all get our degree and go out in the real world, and it's surprising where the jobs take us. I started out as a livestock photographer and a cattle fitter, was an editor and publisher for newspapers, got into extension fairly late in my career. So tell me, what's your plans? What dream job after graduation? We've got it started, Becky. We'll just keep the rotation going.
I'll just lead it off again here. So I actually just accepted a position about a couple weeks ago. I'll be a livestock production specialist with Purina. So I'll be doing dairy cattle feed sales and consulting. And that will bring me back home to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which I'm super excited about. I've loved my time here out in Iowa and the Midwest, but I'm definitely excited to kind of go back to where my roots are and just return home. So I'm pretty excited about it.
And I guess I can go next. So everyone will laugh because what do I do after I graduate? I'm going back to school for a long, long time. So I actually accepted a position. It's a combined DVM PhD program at Colorado State University. And basically what they do is they kind of fit me with different research mentors to kind of rotate through. And then I decide what do I envision to apply to my career and what I want to do in veterinary medicine. And, I hope to apply that more closely, thinking about nutritional physiology and how that impacts health, and also thinking about in the context of food security. So when I went to Uganda, it was really eye-opening, I suppose, for me to see how much health of mothers, human mothers, impacts the health of their children, their ability to lactate. I say lactate like I'm talking about cows, but where my mind is coming from, of course. And so I see, animal models can be used to understand how we can better help people. And, working with Dr. Baumgart, looking at stress and physiology, in subtropical and tropical climates, there's heat stress, feed restriction stress for people and animals. And so that's what I want to focus on when I do a lot more school, probably about 7 years more.
And then like Grace, I will also be heading off to more school. I'm planning to go down to University of Florida next year to pursue my master's in animal science with a focus in management to hopefully become a consultant in the near future.
And for me, upon graduation, I have an internship in dairy management at a farm out in California. It'll be Fern Joe Farms in Tulare, the center of the state. That'll just be an internship, and I'll look for different full-time opportunities come the fall for either working as a dairy manager or herd manager, with the long-term goal of someday owning my own dairy and combining my food science side to do on-site processing and transfer that into their cafe or restaurant, but making it really a whole experience. I want to see the cow to the glass of milk and everything in between, and present that to the consumer too.
And all of us are very excited about Brianna's vision and goals because I definitely want to go try her products already.
You're all invited immediately.
Well, you brought up a good point about dairy products, and that was going to be my final question. We can't leave this podcast without talking about, some of our favorite dairy products, whether that's what's your favorite ice cream or what's your favorite dairy product. So let's start with Brianna this time.
I hear this question on a lot of podcasts, so I always think about what is my favorite and everything. And I also just love dairy products, but I think at the moment, my favorite dairy product is cottage cheese, and that changes, but I just bought cottage cheese the other day for the first time in my life of actually buying cottage cheese, and I'm addicted. I eat it every day for a snack. So currently that's my favorite dairy product.
My favorite dairy product, pretty simple, just cheese. It's very versatile. There's many different options for many different food types. I think I always get mad whenever the hotel we stay at for Dairy Challenge, I was a little sad that they didn't have cheese to put on my eggs or something like that. But if I had to narrow down to a type of cheese, I'd have to go with a sharp cheddar.
Grace, how about you?
Oh goodness. I was hoping Becky would answer first because I like them all. However, I'm going to say ice cream, and no one's surprised by that. Becky's definitely not surprised by that because sometimes she'll just know that I've had a long day if I come home and have to have some ice cream. So as far as favorite flavors, in my milkshakes, or milkshake wise, I like strawberry, and otherwise I'm just a chocolate person, so anything chocolate.
My favorite dairy product is definitely ice cream. If I had to pick something besides just milk, it would be ice cream. I think Grace probably can tell you too. I mean, last night we went to go get milkshakes because I came home and I was like, it's a milkshake day. So I really like ice cream too. As for flavors, I'm more of a vanilla-based kind of person. So cookie dough, cookies and cream, just plain vanilla.
I'm kind of the odd duck. While I was in Texas, I kind of discovered drinkable yogurt and kefir, and drinkable yogurt. Man, every day has to have some of that in it.
All right, you guys are all making me hungry for dairy products right now. And so it makes it really hard to decide what is my favorite, but I like cheese in all the forms, and ice cream, pretty much any flavor, I will take it. So you guys pretty well wrapped that up for us. Really been exciting to listen to all of your stories and experiences. And Fred, I would say the future is bright for the industry, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
I look at the depth and the knowledge that you've already learned and how you've used that in your career. And it's so exciting to see where you're going to go in your jobs. And I hope that you stay connected with Iowa State University and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach to let us know where you are in the world. And maybe further down the line, we can connect again on another podcast about your job or your experiences down the line.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
you.
Well, again, we want to thank this group for being on the podcast here today, and we want to thank our audience for joining us, and we look forward to visiting with you on the next Dairy News and Views from ISU.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or combination inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.